Cinetech Solutions VP of Sales and Marketing, Nancy Sabino, is here to take a bite out of news from Nerdio, Aruba, Ariaka, Barracuda, and more, plus a special guest interview with Amy De Salvatore of NightDragon on a venture capital investor's view of the cybersecurity market. It's ChannelPro Weekly, number 209, Cookie Bait. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode 209. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host for this show that is the show for you. And who are you? You are the VARs, the SMB, IT integrators, the managed service providers, the IT consultants, the folks that do technology things with other businesses. If that sounds like you, then you are in the right place. If that does not sound like you, well, stick around. You might want to change careers at some point and start doing that kind of stuff anyway. It's going to be a lot of fun, a good show. Joining me each and every week is the man of the hour, the guy who keeps the trains running on time here at ChannelPro, executive editor, Rich Friedman. Welcome, Rich.
And welcome to you, Matt. If you were to conservatively estimate, how much lower would you say your temperature is right now than it was a week ago when we were doing this show?
Yeah, I would say by about 2.5 degrees or so, Rich. So it's funny. The guest doesn't know this, but last week when we were recording, I was kind of suffering a cold. You know, there are other illnesses that existed before the COVID-19 pandemic, and I managed to grab one of those and did the show with about a 101.5 degree fever and some congestion, and I'm almost over it. I just got a little bit of a lingering cough, Rich, but I do feel a lot better this week. So if anybody watched last week and said, wow, Matt kind of looks like he's glassed over and half zombie-like, that was the reason why. But hopefully I pulled it off and nobody was the wiser, except for Rich. You did figure it out after we did the recording we did with the characters for the event. You did figure that one out. So awesome stuff. And speaking of, we did have an event yesterday. Rich, tell us about that.
Yeah, our final event of 2021. We just yesterday did our annual Managed Services and Cloud Solutions online summit. It was great, just great stuff. So, you know, show days are always sort of high pressure days because some of the content is recorded and a lot of the content is delivered live. And anytime you're doing anything live, and in fact, we're going to get into some of this a little bit later in the show because anything can and maybe will go wrong when you're doing stuff live. And as it turned out, that did not happen yesterday. Everything went really, really well. But right up until showtime, it looked like that might not be the case.
Yeah. Yesterday morning at around 7:30 a.m. Central, I almost had an aneurysm when our event platform was completely offline, globally inaccessible. So we were starting to scramble and freak out a little bit. But fortunately, everything turned out okay, and we had a great event. Great content as always, Rich. We had a little hiccup in the middle of the day, of course, when it was the one session I was in doing. Well, Rich got me to dress up in funny costumes and do little funny character voices. So if anybody managed to check that out, yes, you get to see me in an assortment of hats and wigs and funny glasses. So sounds exciting, I'm sure. You know, Rich, I don't know if our guest caught that. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But either way, I am really glad that she's here. We do have an awesome guest host this week. She's the former CEO of Sabino CompTech, which is an integrated outsourced IT department located in Katy, Texas, that emphasize on enterprise-level IT, managed services, consulting, and staff augmentation for SMB. Now, in August, they were acquired by the Synetech Group. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Syntech, maybe it's just Syntech Group. I'll let her clarify here in a minute. A globally recognized leader in managed services, serving several large metropolitan areas, including the Dallas-Fort Worth area and New York City and a bunch of other ones. Please welcome the VP of Sales and Marketing at Synetech Solutions, maybe, Nancy Sabino. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Matt. It's Cinetech Group, so almost. And
I was close.
Definitely had it at the end.
So yeah, I should have clarified that before we started. I didn't really think. Oh, maybe there's two ways to pronounce that. Well, either way, I'm glad you're here, Nancy. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and kind of what your background is?
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me. I'm happy to be here. And a little bit about me. Like you said, I am the former CEO of Sabino CompTech. It was an MSP that my husband and I started in 2016. And really that came out of transitioning from a break fix residential model. And 5 years later, we kind of took a look at the market, where things are going, and an opportunity came up that was a sweet deal, and so we took it. And now I am the VP of Sales and Marketing for Cinetech Group, and it's been fun so far. And sadly, I did not catch the event because I am actually in a hotel room at the ASCII event, the last ASCII event of the year. So.
Yeah, we're all trying to get our last minute, last events of the year over. I'm telling you, I think we're very excited that we get a little bit of a break here at ChannelPro before our next one. But it's a good one. Hopefully, maybe it'll be available on demand. You won't want to miss it. So Nancy, tell us a little bit about the new company that you're at and kind of what your role is there and the kind of things you're doing.
Yeah, so we are a managed service provider. We have two different verticals. I say verticals. One is more medium-sized businesses, and the other is professional services, and they could be anywhere from 5 users to 50. And so we're especially because of the merger, we're definitely trying to focus in a little bit more on the professional services side, along with compliance. I think it's something that's the entire industry is kind of looking at and seeing what are the opportunities there. And so that's what my role is kind of looking at what those opportunities are and being able to then help grow the company into more nationwide, if not eventually global.
Yeah, wow, very cool. So you said that you started your first venture. You kind of got into this by starting an MSP with your husband. And Rich, I find that comment interesting because we've talked a lot about recently and in the magazine about couples who start businesses together, and it seems like it's a pretty common thing. How was the dynamic working with your husband on growing a business from the ground up?
It worked. That's first off, yeah, it definitely worked. It wasn't our first business together. So I think by the time that we got to the MSP, we kind of both understood what our strengths were, and the dynamic between us was more natural. And so we settled into our each individual strengths. His is more on the technical side, and while I had to learn it, it's not my favorite. And so I focused more on the business development and the business growth. And so, yeah, it worked. And so that's essentially what led us to the merger or to the acquisition with the Cinetech Group. Was they realized some of the items that we had been doing, the processes and automation that we had been putting in place. And that's something that attracted them. And yeah, so that's what we were doing.
So was that the first time that you've gone through an acquisition?
Yes. The very first business that we had, which was residential at break fix for small businesses, we basically closed that one down to start the MSP. And so that was a difficult choice, but we had started that company when we were 22, and lots of lessons learned. And so when we started the MSP, we realized, okay, we're going to take a lot of the things that we learned from the very first business and move that into the MSP model. And so we kind of started it off in a way that was focused on a single service and basically creating a platform, which we called the Awesome IT Way. And that's the only thing that we focused on for our customers.
Wow, it almost markets itself. Using the word awesome always makes it stick in people's minds. How long did the acquisition take? So you said we went from in August, so you built the company over about 6 years, give or take, right? And then how long was that process?
I think it was shorter than most acquisitions would have been. The couple of reasons why I think. One, we sold to a friend and a mentor. So that definitely helped the process. The second thing is when we started the company, we were looking at it in the sense of the exit in mind. And so everything that we were going to need for the acquisition, we made sure we had in place already from the very beginning.
Interesting. Okay, so if you could give others who might be running their own MSPs right now, thinking about maybe exiting, because I mean, mergers and acquisitions in the MSP space is just it's just gangbusters right now. What was there anything about the process that surprised you? Anything that you wish you did differently, or any advice that you want to give for folks who might be looking to exit?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I would say make sure that you get a evaluation for yourself. That was the very first step that we did. We tend to overvalue what we've built just because there's an emotional attachment. And so I wanted to make sure that we had a very objective look at what we had built before we even brought it to market. And so we had a third-party evaluation done for the company itself. That gave us basically more knowledge into what we were actually selling and what was going to be valuable. That also helped with some of the negotiations going into the acquisition itself, because what we thought was valuable may not be valuable to the seller. And really, when it comes down to an acquisition, that's what matters, is what the buyer finds to be valuable. And so having that evaluation done prior to gave us a lot of different tactics that we were able to use in order to negotiate through that sale.
I bet the negotiation. Did you bring any like donuts or anything to try and like sweeten the negotiation a little bit?
Yes.
What did you bring? What was the item of choice?
Cookies.
Cookies. Now okay. So did you get like the high end cookies from like the bakery?
Yeah, there's in Texas we have I don't know if they're nationwide, but Tiff's Treats is the cookie company of choice for me at least, and so that's kind of what I used.
Carbs are always good
to
to increase your position of leverage. Brian, I've never heard of that one. Rich, have you heard of Tiff's Treats?
No, I haven't actually, and now I'm filing that away because I'm in Texas most years a few times. I got to go check it out.
Rich, have you ever brought high quality carbs to try and get things to go your way?
No, although I mean, sort of. I mean, my immediate answer to that is I've gone to enough meetings with our buddy Joel Zaid. Joel will bring carbs to the meeting. I don't have to think about it. Joel will get pastries or something, and so I have been part of bringing carbs to the meetings.
Okay, so Nancy, if you're in the cookie bakery and you're like, I need the ultimate cookie to swing this negotiation our direction, and you can only choose one cookie, what's the type of cookie that you pick?
I would go classic with chocolate chip.
Yeah, you never go wrong with chocolate chip.
Exactly.
Always a good. See, people will get confused. They'll think like I'm going to go exotic, like macadamia nuts. And I got to tell you, anytime anybody opens a box of cookies and all they see is macadamia nut, it's instant disappointment.
Yep.
Now,
and those are my favorite.
They are good, but you can't just have that. Like it has to complement another more classic cookie, at least in my opinion. I don't know. You know, everybody's got their own cookie thoughts, I suppose. But yeah, probably safe to go classic. I agree with you. So you got through this acquisition, and you stayed on as VP at the company that acquired you. What did your husband do, if I may ask?
Yep, he also stayed on. So that was part of the negotiation aspect. And I say that, but really that was, again, one of the reasons why the acquisition worked so well is we wanted our team and all of our customers to stay on board. And so that's something that we worked through. And so my husband is now serving as the VP of technology for the company. And he's working on a lot of the automation that we are putting in place, bringing a lot of the tools and skills from our company into Cinetech. And so with that is some of the compliance and security knowledge that he has as well.
Very cool. One last one. I know Rich is probably dying to ask something, but I got one more question, because while we're getting the tips and advice, and I wasn't kidding that I see that there's a lot of couples that start MSPs and try to run businesses, and often we've talked to many couples where it works. But I have to imagine in a lot of cases, working with your spouse can be very, very challenging and very difficult. What were some of the things that you and your husband have done, given that you have a lot of experience with over 2 companies over a long time? What are some of the things that has allowed your marriage to continue to be successful while also being business partners?
Oh, continuing date nights. And so it's very hard when you are both in business together, and you're raising kids together, and a lot of the times that family time or the couple time goes in the direction of talking business. And so we definitely try to minimize that as much as possible for an hour, 2 hours of date night, and make sure that we were talking about other things outside of the business. And I think that not only helped our marriage, but also us in the business, because we had a different connection beyond the business itself.
So, I'm curious, Nancy, because Matt mentioned, that the M&A market out there in managed services is gangbusters, which is absolutely true. And, that's happening, and all this private equity money is flooding into MSPs right now, because there is this idea that there's an opportunity to create bigger MSPs with a national, or you were saying like global footprint. And that these bigger companies maybe will be out competing the smaller ones down the road. Did any of your thinking, I mean, that you got approached by someone you know and trust and consider a mentor, that was a big issue in terms of why you agreed to become part of Cinetech. But was any of that analysis in terms of where the market is headed, and bigger companies versus smaller companies sort of on your mind when you decided to go ahead and make that deal?
Oh, yes, definitely. So, it's something that has kind of slowly been ramping up within the industry, and within, I think, because of COVID, I think it just exploded even more so. And so when I started to look at the market itself and realizing if there are more larger nationwide MSPs, we're not going to be able to compete, not just on a pricing level, but on a talent level. And so that was one of the driving forces behind me actually being more open-minded to an acquisition than I had been previously, because I realized there's no way that I can basically get that talent that we would need in order to grow and scale on our own. And so that's when I started to look at, okay, what else can we do to continue to grow in a sense, especially for our own individual careers, for our own technicians and engineers that we had on board, and also be able to continue helping or being a part of the MSP world. And so that was the main driving force, was seeing where things were headed and realizing there's a bubble. Eventually it will burst. And so I wanted to get ahead of it and make sure that I was able to get an evaluation that I felt was what we've worked so hard for. So yeah, that for sure.
Absolutely. Well, it's a fascinating story, and I think you definitely did. If you were setting yourself up for acquisition and thinking about selling, I think you did it at the right time. History will look back, and I think you'll be like, yep, that was the right thing to do then, for sure. So awesome story. And it's great you're on with us here today. We're so excited to have you and to get your take. We're going to talk about a little bit of news. We're going to talk about some other stories. Would love to get your take as a partner at an MSP to see what you think about these things as much as possible. So what are we going to talk about? Well, we got an amazing show lined up with you. Nancy will be here with us for the whole show. We're going to talk about Nerdio. They've got some news today. We're going to talk a little bit about AWS, and not probably in the most flattering light, at least not this week. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Aruba. They've introduced some stuff that we're going to talk about. Rich, I don't even know if I've heard of this one. Aryaka? What's an Aryaka?
Let's save that for later.
Okay, well, we're gonna find out what an aryaka is. Has something to do with mammals in the African grasslands, I think, something like that. We're gonna talk about barracuda. That's a fish, so we're gonna talk about fishing today, as well as African animals. It's gonna be a great show. Oh, and I don't want to forget, we have an awesome interview coming up as well with Amy De Salvatore. She's the VP of Business Development at NightDragon. So we're gonna talk about some capital investment stuff and the cybersecurity market. It's really gonna be a great show. Strap in, folks. You are not gonna want to miss a single minute of it. Rich, tell us what Nerdio's got going on.
Well, I will tell you that, and this ties directly into the AWS story that you were hinting at there as well. I mean, arguably that's the biggest story in IT this week, right? That on Tuesday of this week, as we record this, an AWS region went down, and it took down, Netflix and all these giant companies with it. It took down our event platform. This is why we were having some availability issues earlier in this week. So it was highly, highly disruptive. It was all over the news. CNBC, Wall Street Journal was talking about it. Very next day, Nerdio announces the latest feature addition to its Nerdio Manager products. So Nerdio, for folks who don't know them, it's interesting. I first got to know them as a company that had this sort of streaming all-in-one suite of SMB product. It was sort of like an SMB network in a box that you streamed over the internet. Initially, they did that out of their own cloud. Then they started doing it out of Microsoft Azure. Along the way, they became really sort of the channel's most informed, most expert Azure expert for MSPs. And so really what they do today is help people get into Azure. Nerdio Manager is a product that they introduced originally for larger businesses that were maybe doing some things in Azure and wanted to start doing Azure Virtual Desktop in particular. So if you had an existing Azure footprint, here's a product to kind of accelerate the Azure Virtual Desktop AVD rollout process. And then very early this year, Nerdio introduced a version of that multi-tenant specifically for MSPs. And so now both of those products have some BDR features that Nerdio announced. And just to run through those quickly, so there's active host pool disaster recovery functionality. So basically, if you are an MSP supporting Azure Virtual Desktop through Nerdio, when one of your customers logs in, they're going to get logged into two separate Azure regions, so that if one of those regions goes down, you fail over to the other one, active, and the customer still stays available. There's an image backup feature that is going to make multiple copies of images, backup images, in multiple regions. So again, if a region becomes unavailable, you still have access to image backups if you need them. There's a tool, an Azure related tool from Microsoft called FS Logic's Cloud Cache. Basically, it's a tool that allows you to store the user profiles that make AVD work. Again, multi-region kind of strategy there so that you don't find yourself without access to those profiles when you need them. So common theme here is disaster recovery availability functionality for Nerdio Manager that is kind of spreading things out across multiple regions. So that if a region becomes unavailable, you and your customers, more importantly, are not out of business. And what makes this incredibly timely, like Nerdio, didn't know AWS was going to go down the day before they announced all this stuff, like probably 12 hours, less than a day before they announced all this stuff. But what happened to AWS? They had an issue in a region, their East region, and that's what created all these problems for so many companies out there. And it was really sort of an illustration, a reminder that yes, by all means, we are all rushing into the cloud, and I'm certainly not going to argue that that's a mistake, but you have to be kind of thinking about these availability issues if your customers really are relying on the cloud. And these, there were a number of different takes after the AWS news about how do you do that? What do you do to sort of prepare yourself for these kinds of situations, which are rare? The hyperscalers like AWS and Microsoft and Google, they don't go down a lot, but they do go down. And are your customers going to be ready when that happens? And one approach to that is to take a sort of multi-cloud strategy, so that if AWS has a problem, you're okay because you've also got Azure to lean on. And another is a sort of multi-region strategy. If you're going to go all in on Azure, as a lot of channel pros do, what can you do to spread the risk out across regions, so that if a region has a problem, you're not finding yourself with a massive headache and your customers are down. So, on its own, if you're a Nerdio partner, or you're a channel pro who's kind of interested in Azure Virtual Desktop, the news from Nerdio is interesting. It is also, again, an especially timely series of announcements, given what we were sort of reminded of from that AWS story.
Yeah, who is the PR person at Nerdio? I'm curious.
I could give her.
Well, whoever that person is, I'm going to give you one word of advice, and I'm talking to you, PR person at Nerdio. Go to Las Vegas and start placing bets, because you are the luckiest person on the planet. What are the odds that the company that you were with, the press release you were working on right then and there, that you're about to send out to talk about new features around regional redundancy, if you will, so customers stay up during regional outages, and then the exact thing that you're building features for happens in real life, at least to AWS, at least, but still happens to reinforce your message. It's almost like Nerdio is the one that like hacked AWS or something to make that happen. That is just, Nancy, isn't that just amazingly coincidental?
Oh yeah, the timing couldn't have been better. It's almost like it was planned.
Right, like I'm telling you, PR person, buy lotto tickets, scratch off ones, the Powerball, whatever. You're like the luckiest person ever. So Rich, these features that Nerdio announced, are they like extra paid features of Nerdio, or if you're a Nerdio partner, that you just kind of get these features added to your capabilities?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that definitively, but I think they're just building it into the product. I don't believe these are add-ons charged separately. Well,
it's good stuff. And Nancy, this is probably a good opportunity to kind of get your take on it. So I imagine that you're starting to use a lot more virtual desktop, Microsoft Win 365 deployments, the Windows 365. Are you using more of the Azure-based cloud deployments?
Yeah, we are. Before COVID, that was one of our strategies, was moving our customers over to Azure. And so that is one thing I would have to definitely say, and Microsoft says it themselves, the Azure or the cloud, however you want to name it, is not a backup. And so you have to continuously think about what your backups and or disaster recovery is going to look like. So knowing that Nerdio is implementing this is actually good for them, because that's something that I think is going to attract a lot of people.
Yeah, and you don't think of, I guess a lot of times you think of cloud, you think stability, but how you work with Azure probably every day. How often do you see downtimes in Azure for various? I'm sure I don't think the whole thing crashes out, but like parts of it certainly don't work from time to time.
Right. I mean, you're still talking about infrastructure. So, whether it's obviously the deployment of resources is going to be a lot quicker and things like that, but it's still, you just never know. And so having those backups is going to be just as important as if it was sitting in a server closet. So that's one thing that we have paid attention to. And when you think about the cloud, it's not just the redundancy on uptime or however that goes. It's also, what if there's file corruption? So you still have to plan for all of those aspects, and then also have redundant internet within the site. Because if you don't have internet, you can't access it. So what does that matter? So there's definitely more redundancies when you think about the cloud that a lot of people don't actually implement, but that should be implemented when it comes to moving your customer base over to Azure or AWS.
Yeah, you gotta have two of everything, it seems like these days. Two of everything, two internet connections, two hosts in the cloud at the same time. I guess at some point you have to have two employees for every job, just in case one employee goes down.
Redundancy is key.
Redundancy is key. Yeah, all good stuff. Any other comments about Nerdio? Do you use Nerdio? Does all this sound good to you?
So we don't currently use Nerdio. We had looked into Nerdio before, and we just, you know what? I couldn't tell you the reason we tried not to, or we didn't go for it. But I know that Nerdio is actually something that we continuously look at. So maybe this will be that pool that we needed.
Yeah, I have to imagine that the more you get into virtual desktop, the more something like Nerdio is attractive. Because it makes a lot of that easier. Yeah, easy management, and now redundancy features to kind of keep employees connected to their virtual desktops even during major outages. So yeah, cool. Rich, any other comments on the Nerdio story or AWS going down?
No. I think we have covered it.
Fantastic. Well, let's move on to our next. Looks like a couple stories. We're going to talk about Aruba, who's introduced some appliance-free networking solution, and you'll tell us a little bit about that. And you're going to tell us what an Araka is. Aryaka. What's an Aryaka?
Aryaka, I believe.
Yeah, what is that?
The common thread that ties both of these stories together, Aryaka and Aruba, is that they both involve, these announcements both involve SD-WAN and SASE. Interesting that both these things were announced in the same week. That's sort of a sign of the times kind of deal. I mean, we spoke recently on the podcast about how SMB networks are changing as everybody goes all in on cloud. The networks are getting simpler. There's less east-west traffic. Everything's really kind of north-south. Get me into the cloud and back out as securely and quickly as you can. And so that's going to change the way networks get designed. There's also just explosive adoption going on now, and you will see more and more of this, of both SD-WAN and SASE, because and by this point, to even say it is just a ridiculous waste of time. The hybrid workforce arrangement, people working from home, not going away. So this is no longer a short-term kind of acute issue to deal with. How do I support work from home employees for the next 6 months or 12 months or until the pandemic is over? This is now a permanent fact of life for small and mid-sized business IT. And so now is really the time people are thinking about, well, what is the optimal way to connect those people who are working from home and to do that securely? And SD-WAN and SASE are really key parts of that conversation right now. And so both Aryaka and Aruba rolled out combinations of those two services this week. And in the case of Aryaka, they also announced this in conjunction with this whole new sort of global L3 network private core that they've introduced. So they have this whole new backbone that they're using to deliver this service globally. They have a new associated solution that they call Azure, which basically will look across that SD-WAN connection, automatically detect applications, monitor, optimize, troubleshoot those applications. It can recognize right now over 3,500 of them. So interesting sounding kind of management tool. Aryaka deals with big businesses. They're increasingly dealing with smaller businesses as well. And so there are cost optimized and performance optimized versions of these services that they introduced this week. So if you're a big company and you're willing to pay big, but you really need fast performance, you've got an option there. If you're a little bit more cost constrained, you have an option there as well. And then the Aruba service is particularly interesting because it's one thing to extend SD-WAN and SASE out to a branch office. And in fact, companies have been doing this for a long time. That's what made Aryaka into what it is they are really an SD-WAN specialist. And that's, it's been a mainstay of branch networking for a long time. Now, all of a sudden, when you've got people working from home, you have a lot of what people sometimes refer to as branches of one, right? You've got lots and lots of branch offices with one employee in them. And often that branch site is somebody's apartment somewhere. And so space is an issue, and there's obviously no IT support on site and so on. So you could, in the past extend SD-WAN and SASE, the security element of that, out to that person's apartment. But to do that, you were going to have to ship out some kind of gateway appliance. And this gets expensive. You're buying lots and lots of gateway appliances for a bunch of different employees. You're shipping them out there. Where is somebody going to put that in their downtown Chicago apartment or whatever? So the appliance piece of it is what has led to a lot of companies leaning more on like VPN and stuff like that versus SD-WAN and SASE along with it. Aruba's solution that they announced this week, which is called Aruba Edge Connect Micro Branch, does not require an appliance. All it requires is an Aruba remote access point. And not only, in fact, does it not require an appliance, it doesn't require a software agent. Because once you're out at that branch of one and they've got a Ring doorbell or a Nest, thermostat or whatever else IoT, like you can't put an agent on all that stuff, but you do want to be able to secure it and connect it and so on. So no gateway, no agent. All it needs is the Aruba access point. You get, despite the fact that you're not, you don't have the gateway on site, you're kind of getting all of that SD-WAN goodness, basically, in terms of being able to prioritize traffic. For example, if you want to prioritize the Zoom traffic and Teams over other stuff, you get all of the tunnel and route orchestration stuff that often comes with SD-WAN. So you can set it up so that that Zoom traffic, for example, doesn't have to bounce back to headquarters before going to Zoom. You can route it directly to Zoom if you consider that a trust. So you get a lot of functionality that you don't get from VPN, certainly. So what you need, if you're an Aruba user, you've got to have one of their remote access points running version 10 of the Aruba OS, and you have to have what they call a foundation access point license. Beyond that, you don't pay anything additional. You can go ahead and take advantage of this Edge Connect micro branch technology. And just to put you in a ballpark, the access points start, I believe, at about $575 a list and go up from there. The foundation licenses cost $145 per access point. So just to kind of give you a sense for what you're paying for this, but the micro branch service itself actually doesn't cost anything over and above those fees. So again, two solutions, same week, both dealing with the same issue, which is what is going to be the fastest, most secure way to connect those remote sites. And these are both designed to make SD-WAN and SASE a more practical option for the branch of one.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how everyone is dealing with this particular problem. So Nancy, I have to imagine that this is a big thing that you are dealing with right now with your customers, right?
Yeah, it is, certainly is. And so what we have kind of, the direction that we've gone through is either Meraki, I can't think of the name. Anyway, Meraki has a product that works for a single user, but it is expensive, so it's not very practical. And then other than that, we go towards the VPN for actually dialing into the offices and things like that. So the solution sounds like it would be a definite option, especially the cost seems like it's not too bad. So maybe it would work.
Yeah, it seems like there's really still no great. This is probably one of the better solutions I've seen. But anytime you got to deploy hardware to an individual's spot, it becomes a sticking point. The cost adds up big time. But I think MSPs are missing the boat here. I think if they wanted to start driving employees back to the office, just tell them all you have to have. If you're going to stay at home, that's fine, but you're going to have a big, gigantic server rack right in your kitchen. Right? There's going to be a firewall on it. There's going to be access points. There's going to be servers. There's going to be data storage. It's like, hey, you want to work at home? You got to have all this stuff. I bet you get a lot more people going back to the office.
I think you're right. I think you're right for sure. I would.
I've got another 2-word way to get people back at the office: TIFs treats.
Ooh. Absolutely.
No server rack in your office at the office, and cookies. Cookies will get people back. Yeah. So, Rich, this is I don't know really what else there is to talk about this particular solution. It looks like it's nice. It looks like there's just a lot of vendors that are trying to figure out how to manage that. Now, Nancy, can you tell us, maybe for those who might be starting to dabble with this, what the primary advantages, disadvantages of VPN, because that seems like the least expensive and no hardware approach to remote connections, but there's certainly security concerns with VPNs, right? Versus what features like this offers that might be better. What would you do when? What's the pros and cons? Tell us about what you would do.
Oof, you're asking me a question of the area I said I don't like. No, really, how I have to, retrace my technical brain here and see if I can give you an answer that makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, just ignore it. Ignore the advice. No, so when it comes to a VPN, there's licenses involved for sure, depending on what vendor you are using. The ones that are licensed are going to be the more secure options, just because there are updates to it, there are security patches to it, so on and so forth. So we in particular are a Sonic Wall shop, and so we utilize the Sonic Wall appliance as well as the VPN appliance and the licenses that go with it. But there's, Cisco has their own, and the only one that I would say stay away from is obviously Windows based, but everybody has their own choice. So other than that, what we take a look at is what is going to be easier on the end user aspect of it, because if it's going to be too complicated for them to connect, then they're not going to do it, and that defeats the purpose of having a VPN. So that for sure it's all items that we take a look at. And I don't know if I answered your question, but I hope I did.
No, it's good. That's good. It's good insight, because all those things you kind of have to think about: ease of use and security, and what's practical to deploy. As you said, there's a Meraki solution you guys are using, but you said it's really expensive. And if you've got the business has 300 remote employees, if you're deploying $2,000 of hardware per employee, that's a huge investment that adds up big time. Now, Rich, we talked about Aryaka. Did you kind of go through their news here as well? I don't remember a whole lot about this.
That was actually where I started. Yeah, I talked about Aryaka, and then I talked about Aruba.
Okay, and then is there anything about the Aryaka story you wanted to highlight as also interesting?
Well, I mean, I guess the only other thing I didn't mention there, for folks in the audience who have done business with Aryaka in the past, is pricing, as I understand it, has traditionally been relatively customized with them. And so now, for the first time, in conjunction with the rollout of these new services, they've created some standard pricing for the 5 most popular service tiers that they deliver. So it's a little bit easier to shop and anticipate and predict what you're going to be paying for some of those solutions than it's been before. Cool.
Yeah, and folks, there is a lot of detail in both of these news stories that you probably want to read and learn about. So we put all of the links to the articles that we're talking about in the news releases on our show notes page for episode 209. So if you're on like an iPhone, go to channelpronetwork.com, find the show sheet for 209, and we'll put all the links there for you, all the information. Go and read along as we talk about them, so that way you can kind of get a little bit more insight. If your podcast app, if you open that up, you might have all the links right there for you conveniently. If you're watching on YouTube, hi. Leave a comment below, hit the like button, and make sure you subscribe as well, so that way that certainly helps us out, and give us your thoughts on what you think of some of these stories. But if you're on YouTube, open up the description area of the video. We'll put the links for you there as well, so you can follow along as we go. I think we got one more news story we're going to talk about, Rich, and that involves did we ever determine what an Aryaka is? What is an Aryaka?
I don't. Go ahead and Google that while I quickly take people through this news from Barracuda here.
Okay, I'm going to find out what an Aryaka is. Tell us what Barracuda's got. And that's a fish. I do know that Barracuda is a fish.
It absolutely is, as well as a security and data protection vendor. I'll cover this relatively quickly because I think it is mostly going to be relevant to Barracuda partners, but there are a lot of them out there. They may have missed this, so I'll just kind of call attention to it, which is that Barracuda has reworked their plan options for email security. So prior to this week, there were basically 5 different plans that you could consider if you were shopping around for email security from Barracuda for your customers. They had a suite of services that they called and call Barracuda Essentials. And there were 3 different tiers of service in there, so sort of 3 different sub-plans within Barracuda Essentials. There was a different plan called Total Email Security. There was a 5th plan called Total Email Protection. All that, by the way, if you are an existing user of any of that, you can continue to use it. You can continue to renew. They're not going to kind of shut you down. But going forward from here, basically, Barracuda is going to have 3 email security plans, period. And they are calling those their advanced plan, the premium plan, and the premium plus plan. And the advanced plan basically is just the email security kind of basics. You get antivirus and anti-spam filtering, malicious attachment protection, DNS filtering, the email only kind of basics. You move up into premium, and you get threat hunting and response, domain fraud protection. Actually, that's where the DNS filtering kicks in, is at the premium level, not at the advanced level. And then if you go premium plus, on top of all the other stuff that you get through advanced and premium, you also get some data protection functionality. So backup, archiving, plus some security awareness training functionality that Barracuda offers, and a service that they introduced earlier this year called Data Inspector. We may even have talked about this on the podcast, I don't remember, but Data Inspector basically is something that can go out into a customer environment and look for something that you hope it doesn't find, but tell it to look for. So PII, credit card numbers, user credentials. If you want to know where that might be lurking at in a customer's environment, you can use Data Inspector to go around and try to hunt that down. And so that's part of the Premium Plus plan as well. Some of what I just mentioned there was actually not available before through any of the 5 plans that the 3 new ones are designed to replace, like the DNS filtering, Data Inspector. So they have not only kind of rearranged things and relabeled things, but they've added some new value, some new functionality into those packages as well. So something to be aware of if you're a Barracuda partner, and if you've been thinking about becoming a Barracuda partner, then it's just gotten a little bit easier to compare your options and shop around.
Easier is always better, most people might say. Nancy, is Barracuda emails, is this one of the tools you use for email security, or no?
No, but we use multiple different tools to cover some of that. So kind of, again, easier is better. So simplifying that, I think, it definitely piques my interest.
And how important is it to have email security?
Incredibly important nowadays. If you don't have it, and what are you doing?
How can you even call yourself an MSP if you don't offer email security? Yeah. So anything in here that sounds interesting or unique compared to some of the tools that you're using now?
Well, so when it comes to like the premium, I think the Premium Plus, combining all of the other tools with the security awareness training as well, I think is something that's interesting, because I don't think I have heard it from a vendor, from an email provider, email security provider before. All of the security awareness training has been separate from that. So I find that to be very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Rich, any now Barracuda is not the only one with email security, obviously. How do they stack up? Who's their big competitors? Did they talk about price? You said that they simplified the tiers. Did they simplify the pricing? Did they do anything there?
I don't know that they simplified the pricing. It's just fewer prices maybe for you to be looking at. And I mean, we didn't get into the specifics on what those prices are. I asked, didn't get an answer on the specifics about what those prices are, but fewer prices to be aware of. The thing I didn't mention actually is that the pricing is all per user per year, is the way they do it.
Per user, so they lock you into a year, and it's available to you folks for the low price of money. Go and check that out and get yourself signed on board for that. All right, with that, I think we're done with news. I don't think we have any other stories, right, Rich?
That's correct.
Waiting in the wings is Amy De Salvatore, the VP of Business Development of Strategic Alliances at NightDragon. We're going to get her on. Nancy's going to be joining us for that interview as well, so stick around. We will be right back. And welcome to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. Great to have everybody back with us. Good to have Nancy here on the other side. We've got an awesome interview lined up. Cybersecurity is one of the hottest areas in technology today, spurring explosive growth, mergers, acquisitions, and investment from private equity. Now, here to kind of give us a venture capital investor's view is Amy De Salvatore. She's the VP of Business Development and Strategic Alliances at NightDragon. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. So nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's awesome to have you on. Great that you're here. If you can, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about what you do at NightDragon?
Sure. So my name is Amy De Salvatore. I've been in alliances pretty much my entire career. So I'm kind of a serial channel and alliances person. I live here in San Francisco, California. At NightDragon specifically, I run business development and strategic alliances. So I'm responsible for putting partnerships in place that can help our portfolio companies scale. Started my career actually in San Francisco in tax services at Arthur Andersen, and quickly made my way into the channel and alliances world in the tech realm and have been in it ever since. So it's really a passion of mine, and it's great to be talking to you today.
Yeah, awesome you're here. I can imagine that if you're doing tax things, that anything would seem like a much better thing to do.
Exactly. This is much more exciting.
I can imagine. Tell us a little bit about NightDragon, for starting with how it got named, because that's like the coolest name ever. But tell us more about them and kind of what they do.
Yeah, the naming story is actually pretty fun to tell. So NightDragon's an investment platform, and it's more people think of us often as just a venture capital firm, but we're actually more than that. There's 3 elements to the firm. We're an advisory firm, first and foremost, where we help companies kind of scale their businesses, and we may or may not invest in those organizations. Then we have the venture firm and the venture investment platform, where we operate much like a typical venture capital would. And then there's a third element, which is a separate organization called NightDragon Acquisition Corp. And what's unique about NightDragon is our sector focus. That's one area where we really differ. We're not just cybersecurity. We're in kind of a unique sector called cybersecurity, safety, physical security, and privacy. It's the CSSP arena. And we look for technologies, next generational technologies that cause the most opportunity in areas for disruption in the marketplace. And then we find companies and teams, stellar teams, that we can help hyperscale to excel in those areas, and we capitalize on them. And that's really the sector focus. Our companies that we invest in are late stage, high growth companies. So there again, I think a lot of the companies that you talk to in venture, they'll tell you that they're earlier stage. We focus on later stage companies. And the reason that that's important from a partner and channel standpoint is it really de-risks the opportunity for channel partners to work with our organizations, because the technologies that we're investing in are somewhat vetted and proven in the marketplace. The companies are a little bit mature and they're more channel ready. So that's really nice for me as a channel professional to be investing in those organizations and bringing them to our partner organizations. We're a relatively new venture platform. So you're going to see more from us in the marketplace. Our founder is Dave DeWalt, who's the former CEO of McAfee, FireEye Mandiant. So many people sort of know who he is. And we're doing really well in the marketplace. I think once you see some of the companies in our portfolio and the investments we've made, you'll see that we're kind of at the forefront of cyber, which is really fun to be a part of.
Very cool. You said there was a neat naming story. I got to hear how this, because NightDragon's a cool name. You don't normally associate venture capital with mythological demon dragon things.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it is a cool story. So NightDragon is actually the name of one of the first major cyber attacks that occurred at the nation state level against the US by China. I mentioned Dave DeWalt, our founder and managing director. He was the CEO of McAfee at the time. It was in 2011. And he actually led the investigation, response, and remediation team and efforts to thwart the attack. And so he always said, at some point, if I start a venture firm or another platform, I'm going to be naming it NightDragon. And that's exactly what he did. And it's actually pretty funny because there was another attack around the same time that was called Dirty Rat, but he ended up going with NightDragon because it's a much cooler name.
He chose well. Yes, I agree. He chose well. Well, very neat. Well, it's an awesome story. Glad to have you here. I'm sure we'll get to learn a little bit more about you as well as we go. So, Rich, I want to send this over to you though, because I know we want to talk about venture capital investors. Why don't you kind of outline kind of how we want to steer the conversation today?
Well, and as good a starting point as any, I think. The way NightDragon came on my radar, Amy, is just a few months ago, you folks announced an alliance agreement with Ingram Micro. And the nature of that agreement, the thinking behind that agreement, as I understand it, is actually kind of a good segue into what I most want to talk about with you. So just help folks understand what you announced with Ingram and why you pursued that.
Yeah, I'd love to. So going back to a question that Matt asked earlier, what is NightDragon and kind of how do we differentiate? The one area that there's another area outside of our sector focus that really makes us different. And that is that everybody on our team comes from the operator world. We've all worked for big companies like McAfee, FireEye, many of the companies. My whole career trajectory is kind of in line with Dave DeWalt's, and there's a reason for that. Because we've been in those roles and Dave is such a believer in the channel, we know what the power of the channel is and how influential it can be in helping companies scale their go-to-market strategies. And so, when I came into the role, one of the first things that I did was I interviewed all the portfolio companies to find out what they needed most. And the two number one areas that they really felt they needed help with were hiring, so attracting, hiring, and retaining top talent. And the second area was scaling their go-to-market. How do they get leverage from partners? How do they start to scale their businesses outside of a direct model? And so that has been, my laser focus since I've been here for the last 7-8 months is how do I put my operator experience to use and start developing relationships with the Ingram Micros of the world, not just with distribution, but with value-added resellers and system integrators, so that our companies can start to see and realize the power of working with partners in a channel specifically. And so Ingram was kind of one in a stream of announcements that we made within the channel, specifically for North America. The others include helping our companies scale into other key markets, including Japan, where we put an agreement in place with Macnica. We put one in place with Exclusive Networks in Europe. And then Ingram was the logical choice for North America because of their emerging business group and some of the innovations that they're doing to support emerging businesses. So you're going to see more from us in this area. We're kind of going around the globe and systematically putting key agreements in place with key markets. In fact, I think the first one we put in place was with Carasoft for federal, which is a key market for our companies.
So, a lot of the folks in our audience here do business with Ingram. You sign an agreement with Ingram. It's a sign that you want to help your portfolio companies court our audience, essentially. And what's kind of interesting to me about this conversation is we kind of get to see what that looks like from the other side of the equation. So you spend a fair amount of time helping those portfolio companies understand the channel and how to communicate with them and pull them in. What are the things that you most often need to sort of teach or help those companies understand about who partners are, what partners want, and how to attract more channel partners?
Yeah, well, and by the way, this is where Ingram is just incredibly helpful and amazing with their emerging business group, because they help us on that consultative journey. They actually now have an entire organization that helps consult with our companies and help them put the right channel strategies in place. But it really starts with why work with the channel to begin with. Our companies There's some reticence, obviously, because it is an investment when you're first starting out to work with channel partners. And I think some of our companies feel that pain and they shy away from it and go back to a direct model. And so a lot of it is the hand holding to let them know that the investment will pay off and show them examples of the investment paying off with other companies that have been successful working with the channel. And Ingram has been amazing in helping us do that. In fact, they have a NightDragon branded resource that helps work with our companies to onboard them and offer kind of a white glove service. Not all distribution companies do that, or value-add distribution companies do that. So the first step is helping them understand the value by providing them examples, but then also making sure that we're operationalizing their business to be channel friendly, right? Some of them don't really understand how the margins work. They don't understand the relationship between a reseller and distribution. And so it's almost like a channel 101 course. And the way that we do these courses, so to speak, is we actually put playbooks in place. So we'll sit down with each individual company, understand what their goals are for scaling their business, and then we'll put a customized channel plan in place to help them go to market. And that's kind of their personalized playbook that's NightDragon and Ingram branded.
Are there common sorts of barriers or obstacles that these companies run into once they've kind of learned who the channel is, why they want to work with the channel, why margins matter to the channel partners and so on? Are there common issues that they tend to run into just in terms of getting through to partners, getting partners interested enough to sign up that you consult with them about?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I'd say the number one obstacle is just really understanding how it works. But number two is access. A lot of them don't know where to start, and they don't have the relationships because they're newer organizations on who to work with and how to work with these companies. One of the things that I've noticed in the channel industry, which has been so refreshing with Ingram and the other companies that we're working with, is that they don't have this policy of working with everyone like they used to in the past, right? They're being very discerning and selective about only working with technologies where they see a market and that they think will prevail in the marketplace. And they don't want to work with companies where there's too much overlap with what they're already working with. And so I think that's kind of an eye-opening moment for some of our companies who are used to the old traditional philosophy of distribution in terms of, just a volume play, they'll work with anyone. So really understanding that value-add distribution is a true partnership. These companies will back you, and they will be in your corner, and they will help you scale their business because there's mutual value add for both of you in working with them. And so I think it's kind of a new paradigm for a lot of the companies that are in our portfolio because they're used to a philosophy around the channel that maybe is a little archaic. So it's our job to kind of impart what Ingram looks like and what these new emerging business groups that support innovative tech look like.
Nancy, I'm curious if any of this sort of resonates with you, in terms of what you want from these partners, what maybe mistakes or misconceptions you tend to run into in terms of what they think you want and so on. So, I mean, you're the person they want to pull into their partner programs. How does this sort of sound from your perspective?
Yeah, so I was listening in, and really one thing that stuck out to me was the vendors wanting to go direct. And so kind of looking at the channel and not really seeing the opportunities there, or it taking a little bit, because really the channel is all about relationships. And so if we don't have those relationships there, if we don't know the product, if we can't trust the people behind the product, then it becomes difficult for us to then, pass that down to our customers. And so that's one thing that I think stuck out to me a lot. And so I'm wondering what can be done, if there's more that can be done than just, with the distributor in order to develop some of those relationships with the channel even more. And so that we don't have to look at the direct option or feel like we're in competition with the same product that we also want to look into.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if that's directed at me, I think that what I'm seeing in terms of the evolution of distribution in the market right now is that they're doing it right. Ingram is much further along, I'd say, than a lot of the other added distribution companies that we work with. But they're all now starting to realize that they need this white glove service, an innovation arm that helps onboard these companies and build very close relationships with them, actually have people assigned to the organization and build that and start building that trust. Ingram, because they have this emerging business group and they have a team of people assigned to these organizations, you start to see those relationships form. And once the company starts to see that they're not going to be working with a competitor, and they start to feel like they're supported through every phase of that life cycle, including business development support, putting together a reseller ecosystem, working with them on pre-sales support, advocating for them with resellers, that's when our companies really start to get emboldened and have the confidence that, okay, distribution is going to support me and I'm going to see this investment pay off. So that's been really, really nice for me to see in the industry. So I feel like it's happening. In terms of what more can be done, I think venture capital firms, investors could do more as well. NightDragon's unique because we are operators. We're doing a lot with our companies, but not all venture firms, I think, go to the level of putting playbooks in place and advisory for their companies. So maybe you're going to start to see the industry moving in that direction as well.
You're in an interesting position, Amy, sort of in between folks like Nancy and the vendors, and we're kind of talking a little bit about what the vendors need to understand about the channel and what they can do to get better at working with the channel. Is there anything you want the channel partners to understand about the vendors that they maybe get wrong? Are there misplaced expectations, complaints that you tend to hear from channel partners that maybe feel a little bit ill-informed or unfair somehow if you look at it from the vendor's point of view?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I feel bad asking for this, but I think it's necessary. And that is that maybe just have a little bit more patience. Like I have been in situations since I've been in this role where we had one of our companies who ended up taking a couple deals direct because they had a new CRO come in who didn't necessarily recognize the value of the channel. The margin was just too painful. They didn't handle it appropriately, and that channel partner completely cut them out of the equation going forward from any sort of future relationship. And while I understand that, and I would probably want to do the same thing as a channel partner, just know that there can be some bad apples in these companies. Everybody has a different educational and learning curve in terms of absorbing and embracing the channel. And so, as a venture firm, that's something that we have to kind of deal with internally, and just know that we see that, we try to make changes. And if we come back to you and say, hey, give us another chance, we'd love it if you give us another chance, just because not all companies are on the same level of maturity in terms of how to work with the channel. So that would be my ask.
So when you ask about patience, about how long does it take from when you add a company to your portfolio that you really believe that you get them on the right track? Is that a year-long journey in your experience? Is it a 2-year journey? How long does it normally take?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of learning that. Like I said, because we're in a somewhat different position because our companies are late stage, high growth, so they're a little more ready to be a part of a channel ecosystem, I think, than others. But I've been on board for about 7 or 8 months. And for example, from the time that we signed the first distribution master agreement across the portfolio, we now have 4 of our 9, what was 8 at the time, companies onboarded into that program. So that gives you, 50% are now part of that program, which is good. It really depends on the region that we've signed the distribution agreement for, and then the readiness of the companies within that realm. So it sort of depends, but I think that's fair to say maybe somewhere between 6 to 12 months.
Okay.
It just out of curiosity, as much as anything else, and I should have asked this before, are there names among those portfolio companies that you work with our listeners and viewers would be familiar with?
Yeah, probably. I think so. There's quite a few. We have an awesome SASE vendor in the portfolio called iBoss. So you may have heard about them in the marketplace. Obviously, really important technology this day and age because of the remote workforce and the need to kind of see perimeters disappear from your work and your networking environment, your application environment. One of the companies that just recently went public is a company called ForgeRock. So you've probably seen them in the news. Another one of the companies that's a little bit larger is called Onapsis, which is an application security company. So those are a few in the portfolio that you'll hear of, and otherwise others you will hear of very soon. Some of them are just on incredible growth trajectories. We recently invested in a company called Interos, which does supply chain risk management. They actually create a data graph and ingest hundreds of thousands of data sources, both public and private. And then they put it into a modeling system that allows you to map and model and monitor supply chain risk across all tiers within your supply chain. And they assign scores to each of 6 to 8 elements, including operational risk, financial risk, geopolitical, cyber, compliance. And then that obviously allows you to see where you have vulnerabilities in your supply chain, which is, a big problem for us right now, given what happened with the Colonial Pipeline and some of the other cyber attacks that have occurred. So that's one that we just recently led a very large investment in, and they're doing quite well. They just reached unicorn status.
So you mentioned SASE before there, which is something that we were talking about earlier on in the show here, and might be a good example of this. But, obviously security is this giant market. Are there particular segments within security right now that you at NightDragon are particularly sort of interested in as growth opportunities within security?
Yeah. So I mentioned from a sector focus, it's the CSSP arena, but then within that, there's a couple hard and fast rules that we have. One, we like cloud native, obviously, and we love crowdsourcing companies. So there has to be some sort of data sharing element to what they're doing, either through AI or either through crowdsourcing. Because that then creates the applicability of what that company is doing beyond cyber. That data can then be used for other purposes. For instance, the supply chain risk management company that I just mentioned, it's all AI based. We work with another company in the satellite space satellites, basically, which is radio frequency AI platform to kind of detect where there's potential threats on, in the sea, land, air, and space. That also is an AI platform. And so if you think of harnessing that level of data and then crunching that data and being able to share it either, with other companies or potentially with government agencies, that's an opportunity for capitalization in a whole nother realm that we or the company may not have thought of. And so it makes the company much more valuable for us and for the cyber community and the cyber landscape in general.
It's interesting that you're doing or concentrating both on cybersecurity and physical security, because they're from a channel perspective, it's often different people. But I wonder if from your perspective, it ought to be the same people. I mean, if the more kind of traditional IT-oriented folks who are listening to or watching the podcast right now ought to be paying a little bit more attention to the physical security opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think those worlds are merging. We're seeing it. To me, it's very similar to what we're seeing and have seen over the last few years with networking and security. If you think about networking at the infrastructure level, now it's almost impossible to tell where networking stops and security starts, right? You mentioned SASE, that's a perfect example of it. Are you dealing with the infrastructure team or are you dealing with the security team? Well, the same thing is happening with physical security. I mentioned crowdsourcing. We have a company called Premise Data that leverages crowdsourcing technology to identify physical threats on the ground and then kind of tips and cues that information to other sources that can help you remediate those threats. That's the two worlds coming together. And so I think, from a channel perspective, that's an area where I've seen companies like Ingram, for example, start to kind of merge those mentalities. In fact, Ingram has this incredible group called their Delta Force team. And that's exactly the type of merging and cybersecurity trends that they're starting to look at. That team is a cross-functional group of experts across their entire organization, their infrastructure teams, their engineering organizations, their physical security, cybersecurity teams, digital AI, and they all get together and sort of have this think tank approach that helps the portfolio companies scale and onboard into their program. So there again, I mean, what they're doing is pretty innovative, and I think it's at the forefront of what needs to happen.
So the thing that I desperately need to do immediately after we finish recording this podcast is finish writing our cover story for the January issue. And every year, the January cover story is our sort of year ahead preview piece. So while I've got you here, you've got your finger on the cybersecurity pulse, the physical security pulse. As you look ahead to 2022 and the security landscape, other than more ransomware and more spending, what do you kind of anticipate for the year ahead?
So, I mean, I think you're going to see more around this data sharing concept that I've talked about, and that's something that we're really leading. What we're trying to do as a venture firm is build ecosystems, cyber and intelligence ecosystems that share information across platforms. And so, a lot of the companies that we work with and a lot of the channel partners that we're working with, you'll see us start to build these logical ecosystems of companies within our portfolio that can talk to each other and then create additional value. And I think you're probably going to see that as a trend going forward with additional venture firms kind of identifying where there's synergies within their portfolio and then putting those ecosystems together for partners to work with, so that then you have more compelling bundles to sell in the market. And obviously we're helping, a higher volume of our company scale and do so in a really integrated and interoperability fashion. So that's where I think the market's headed. And that's a huge focus for us right now.
Very cool. Well, we got time for maybe one more question. Nancy, I want to give you an opportunity to chime in or make a comment.
Well, a comment really. I think Amy has something there with the converging of data when it comes to the vendors and things like that is something that's going to come up. And I think for the partners that are listening, that's something that is going to be even more favorable for all of us, since we'll be able to look at exactly what else we can add into our own portfolios, and it be more operationally easy for us to integrate for our customers. So I think that that's something that Amy's got dead on with that.
Very cool. And well, at least Amy, I think you've chosen an area that is safe and secure. I don't think bad guys are going away anytime soon. So wouldn't that be nice if that actually happened? But probably not going to happen. Yeah. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being on. I really do appreciate it. If anyone wants to learn more about NightDragon, get in touch with you. How can they do that? How can they find?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Cool. And where can they, if they wanted to get in touch with NightDragon or you, how can they do that? Oh
yeah, absolutely. I don't know if there's a way to get my contact information out, but I can tell you my email address. It's amy@nightdragon.com. NightDragon is with an N, there's no K. And please feel free to reach out to me directly. You can also just visit our website and get in touch with us that way.
Awesome. Yep. And we'll make sure we put that in the show notes page for this episode 209. So folks, go to the ChannelPro Weekly show notes page for this episode, and you'll find all that information there as well. Amy, thank you so much for being on. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have Nancy with us on the other side to close out the show. Maybe have a little bit of fun. You won't want to miss it. We will be right back. And welcome back to part 3 here of ChannelPro Weekly. It's been an awesome episode so far, Rich, and a great interview with Amy De Salvatore. Rich, any highlights from there? She talked about a lot of things, and we probably could have talked a lot longer. It's certainly an interesting market out there right now, very, very active, very crazy, and cybersecurity is only going to get bigger and more active, I think. So any takeaways from you?
For me, very personally, I want to learn more about the data sharing things aspect of what she does there, because, and I'm sure we've said it on the podcast before. A lot of people say it. Security is a team sport, and collaborating with one another through information sharing organizations like the ISAO at CompTIA. And I mean, working together on the problem is how we win. It's basically the only way that we can kind of level the playing field and maybe defeat the adversaries out there. And so I'm sort of curious about how this data sharing priority that they have at NightDragon kind of plays into that bigger picture in terms of, leveraging the data that these companies have individually in ways that make it even more powerful for everybody.
I wonder if we could get more people on team cybersecurity if we got like big foam fingers that people can wave, get everybody in a stadium. That might help too. Or those helmets that you put beer on and then you drink the. No, maybe not. Nancy, I'm losing my voice here. Nancy, any takeaways from you on that? Interesting? Did you learn anything interesting?
Yeah, what she was saying about the cybersecurity and the physical security aspects kind of conjoining or becoming of similar interests. That's something that is interesting, especially for those that deal with cybersecurity now. Like Rich had mentioned, right now it's separate. The IT folks, we like to think of cybersecurity as just the technical piece, and we don't want to touch the many other aspects of it. But talking about the physical aspects of it and how that affects cybersecurity, I think that's something that is interesting, and that could be an opportunity for MSPs in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that those comments also stuck out to me because it seems like, there's all of these separate industries that kind of evolve in businesses, one that I like to go back to a lot is how print and copiers was a very separate thing from IT right back in the day until copiers became just devices on, the more things digitize, the more it seems to kind of like all starts wrapping into IT and becomes more of a big opportunity for kind of everybody. Because you get some people who maybe were only doing physical security, but now they're having to learn this other stuff as well, because that's just the direction that it goes. Technology is permeating everything. So you're going to end up with more competition in the end because we're all kind of dabbling in the same space, which is kind of interesting. Do you find that you have different competitors now who you never thought would be competitors?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you were saying the print is one industry for sure that has, what do they call it, a convergence with the IT market, and so that brings a lot of different competitors that we didn't have previously. And now you have accounting firms that are acquiring IT companies as well. So somehow accounting is coming into the MSP space as well. So that's, yeah, it's crazy.
And pretty soon you're going to have bakers who make cookies acquiring IT firms to get those digital. Oh, that's a different kind of cookie. Never mind. That digital cookies are a different kind of thing. Do those count? Can you get computer cookies in the chocolate chip variety though? These are the questions that keep me up at night, Nancy. I got to tell you. All right. Well, it was a great interview. Thank you so much again for Amy for being on with us. We're going to move on. We're going to play a little fun game with you that we like to play, Nancy, called 5 Questions. And here's how this works. Rich and I are going to make up 5 questions. And the whole point of this, the whole shtick is that Rich and I do not think about it in advance. We make up 5 questions on the fly to ask you. Nothing embarrassing, nothing to no, we're not trying to play gotchas. We're just trying to ask you some fun stuff to learn more about you and have a little fun. Yep. She's in. All right, Rich, question number 1 to you.
Okay. So you're in Katy, Texas. You're based in Katy, correct?
Correct.
And oh gosh, did I just blow my first question? No. So and is that the Houston area or Dallas?
It's the Houston area.
Okay. So this winter, you got frozen solid, right? Like the entire city, unless I'm thinking of a 2020 thing, but I thought that was this year that huge freeze happened there. What is your favorite or maybe least favorite nightmare story for that incredible freeze that happened in much of Texas, including Houston?
That was at the beginning of this year, February, I believe, and thankfully, I was lucky. My house is in the same, I guess, power grid as a hospital, so we didn't have our lights turn off or anything of the sort. But I had everyone else in my family in my house, so I'm an introvert, and that was a little bit of a nightmare with I think it was 12 people, 6 dogs and cats, and a lizard. And so, yeah, that when you're an introvert and you want a corner to hide in, it's impossible when you have so many people in your house.
How long were they there?
A week, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like my nightmare too, for sure. Wow, good times. All right, question number 2 to me. So earlier you said that one of the ways that you and your husband have managed to keep your marriage successful while still being kind of in business together was to do regular date nights. What is your ideal date night?
So we try to do something different every time. But when I get hungry, I am a monster. And usually I cannot function. So me and something new when I'm hungry is absolutely a no-go. So my favorite thing to do is have a margarita at a Mexican restaurant that we love to visit. And that is my go-to thing when I'm hungry and I can't make decisions.
Sounds like fun. And I'll do a question 2B. Best way to make a margarita. Go.
Ooh, okay. Cointra, good tequila, and then some lime juice and salt on the rim.
So classic.
I probably have actual measurements that I just can't think of on the flyer.
So pretty much classic margarita, not going crazy, strawberry. And on the rocks or frozen?
On the rocks.
Lady after my own heart, Rich. Rich, question number 3 to you.
So you find yourself with, let's call it 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon with nothing else to do, no child care, no family response, yet 3 hours, all you time on a Sunday afternoon. What do you do with it?
Oh, that is a good question. I would probably try and catch up on some shows if there is nothing left to do. I am very, very behind on so many different shows. So that's probably what I would do.
Any particular shows that you're watching right now that you're behind on?
Succession is one of them. The new season has come out and I have yet to see any of it. So.
Well, hopefully you get through that one soon. And any other show recommendations that you have gotten through that you would recommend?
Oh, that's a good question. It's been a while. So definitely the Marvel shows. I'm sure everybody else in the world has already watched them, but yeah, I'm catching up slowly.
Very cool. Well, that was not my question number 4, by the way. I was just curious. So we can extend this game to 20 questions if we so want to, because, well, it's our show. We can do what we want. Question number 4 to me. I noticed on your arm you've got some ink there. I'm assuming you didn't put that on there today, and I believe you have quite a lot of tattoos, from what I understand. What's your favorite tattoo that you have?
That's a hard question. My sleeves. Yeah, so I do have 2 arm sleeves, and one of them is brand new. I'm still working on it. I'm not working on it. The tattoo artist is working on it, but I'm working on getting it. And I would have to say so far that the newest sleeve is my favorite.
The newest sleeve. And what is on said sleeves? Maybe some of the reasoning behind a few of them.
It's a book sleeve. So it starts off with a stack of books that opens up. There's wind coming out of it, and then there's different elements of some of my favorite books that are in that. So Harry Potter, the Dark Tower series from Stephen King, and the Hunger Games. So that's different pieces of it are all across my arm.
Cool. I didn't know you were a Dark Tower fan.
Yes.
I'm also a big fan of that series. I'll have to save my questions on that for next time. You have very, very similar taste in literature, if you will. Rich, question number 5 to you.
It's been close to, I was thinking about this. It's been close to 3 years since I've been to Houston, actually. But the thing that always strikes me about Houston is how many restaurants there are. And I mean, there are, like, even for a city that size, it's just kind of incredible. And so what that means, of course, is there are probably hidden gems out there that I wouldn't know about. Other than Tiff Streets, what's the place not to miss in Houston?
Oh, great question. And this is an easy one for me. It's Reina's restaurant, and it is a El Salvadoran, I guess, little dive. And so the most popular dish there is a pupusa, which is a national Salvadoran dish. And the restaurant is owned by my aunt, who purchased it from my mother. And so while I am very biased, I have to say they are the best pupusas ever.
Awesome. You are muted, sir.
Very cool. That was fun. Awesome answers. Good questions. Always fun to learn a little bit more about our guests. Thank you so much for playing. So with that, we're going to start heading into the end of the show here. So Rich, why don't you tell us what we might have missed and what might be coming up down the road?
In terms of what you might have missed, a great way to catch up on that every Friday on ChannelProNetwork.com is through our In Case You Missed It post written by ChannelPro's own James Gaskin. He's going to be talking this week about some announcements earlier from Rubrik. They've got some new products out there. Ingram Micro Cloud had some news about a Contracts Alliance program that'll kind of give you access maybe to some public sector opportunities a little bit more easily. Keeper Security has an interesting alliance with a passwordless MFA company. Passwordless security is sort of what Keeper is about, and now they're working MFA into the equation. And then James will also have some thoughts for you, and I just won't get into the details. I'll simply tell you it has to do with a camel beauty contest in Saudi Arabia, and it turns out there really is such a thing. Now, in terms of what's coming up next week, the weeks are going to get a little bit slower and slower as we head into the holidays here. I think the ASCII group event that Nancy's at right now is probably the last event really of any imports in the channel probably for this year. So there won't be a lot of conference news probably coming up, but there is some product news. It's just all under embargo, so I can't really talk about it.
Well, you won't want to miss that. Make sure everybody stays tuned for that. Now, Rich, I did manage to go to the Aryaka site because I can't figure out what an Aryaka is. It is a name, according to them, derived from Sanskrit, which is an ancient Indian language and loosely means the noble or the truthful. So that's your word of the day, folks. Aryaka. Take that with you in your travels and try to find an excuse to use it today. Nancy Sabino, the VP of Sales and Marketing at Cinetech. Nancy, why can't I say this word? Cinetech Solutions is our guest today. Nancy, thank you so much for coming on. I had a ball having you here. You were a delight to have on. I hope you had a good time.
I did. And thank you so much for having me. I hope you guys have me again sometime.
Absolutely. Would love to have you back. And for those who wanted to maybe get in touch with you, learn more about Cinetech, where can they go? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn would probably be the best place. So look me up at Nancy Sabino, and you can also probably email me, but that's a long email, so I'm sure Matt will have it in the show notes.
We'll put it in the show notes or go through the website. I'm sure that'd probably be the easiest way to find it. So again, thank you so much for being on. It was a ball. Where else you should direct your attention when I say the show notes, that's at channelpronetwork.com. That is the website you should go to each and every day. Make it your homepage. There you'll find the latest news, articles, white papers, resources, downloads, podcasts, all kinds of stuff to not only help you grow your business, make more money, keep you on top of what's going on, but you'll get to learn all kinds of stuff. It's an important place to be. Make sure you don't miss it. And of course, subscribe to the Channel Pro Weekly podcast. Anywhere you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever, Stitcher, we're on all of them. Make sure you do that. If you do want to watch, go to our YouTube channel for Channel Pro Network, subscribe to the channel, and you can follow along. Make sure you leave a comment, subscribe, hit the bell. I don't know, YouTube. They make you do so many things to subscribe and get notifications now, but just do all of those little things, and then you'll get all of those notifications. And with that, we are going to wrap up this episode. Rich, we're coming into the holiday season. I know we're going to be taking a break here at some point. Do we have a show next week, Rich?
We do not. We do not. And that is 100% my fault, loyal listeners and viewers. I am indulging in a longer than usual holiday break this year. So I'm going away. I'm going to be on a beach somewhere for a while and then enjoying the holidays. And so we'll go dark for a little bit because of me and my laziness, and then we'll be right back with you. And actually, I shouldn't assume. I mean, you might go ahead and do an episode while I'm away, Matt, but I will certainly be right back with you in the new year.
I don't know what my plan is, so I guess we will have to figure that out. But folks, if we do take, I could certainly use a little bit of time off as well. I know I have some vacation time coming up, so we might take a little hiatus. Might put together a best of show. I'm not really sure yet. I'll talk to the crew and see what we can do for you. But if we don't, we're not going away forever. We will be back for certain after the new year. So if this is the last you hear from us this year, enjoy your holiday break, and we will see you all soon. Take care.